And welcome to BuzzLine, the show all about Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket athletic sports. I'm your host, Jon Rawl, joined by the publisher of GoJackets.com, Jonathan Leifheit, and we're talking about a very tough opening week loss to Tennessee this week. Jonathan, I know it was a very late Monday night for you. Hopefully you've recovered to some degree by now, maybe not.
Let's go with not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. That's why we're going to be here for the next hour to discuss where things fell apart for Tech and what they're going to do to get back on track. They've got a very short week. Jacksonville State is coming into Bobby Dodd Stadium this weekend.
Yeah, there's no real time for anybody to feel sorry for themselves because they're about to have a pretty darn good football team roll in on a very, very, very short week. So
a team with no sympathy for Georgia Tech.
That's for dang sure.
We're here at Buffalo's Cafe in Cumming, and we've got a great crowd of Georgia Tech fans who've joined us for the show this week, and we just want to say hello to them. And those are dedicated fans. To come here after a loss says something, because it's easy to come when you win, but to come after a loss, hey, and that was a tough loss. So we're going to go through it this week. We're going to get Jonathan's in-depth analysis of the Tennessee meltdown, you could call it. Jonathan's encounter with a obnoxious Tennessee fan. He may want to discuss that and clean it up for radio.
Yeah, we'll try and clean that one up. I'm not sure that I can do that much too much to it. Yeah.
But we've got it all right here on this week's Buzzline from CRM Sports. All right, Facebook Live. We're going to start our first lengthy segment of the week now with Jonathan.
All right.
Assuming we can make it through the hurricane. We just had an H. We've got an I coming, so this is like H.5. Coming through Cumming. It's very bad rain and wind.
Oh, it's blowing.
Yeah.
It's a serious blowout here.
Yeah, so hopefully we won't have any internet issues as we get through this.
Or power. I'm more worried about the power than I am the internet.
So. You know, that is kind of an important part of doing a show.
Yes, somebody who works in the energy industry, I can concur with that.
Yeah. All right, here we go with segment 2. We are back at Buffalo's Cafe in Cumming for BuzzLine, the show about Georgia Tech sports. Buffalo's, where everyone is family. And at this location in Cumming, we're right off exit 14 on Highway 400. We're on Highway 20, also known as Buford Highway. Come see us as we do this show each and every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. Georgia Tech on Labor Day night, so much was going the Jackets' way in the game against Tennessee at Mercedes-Benz Superdome, and unfortunately things happened and Georgia Tech lost in double overtime, 42-41 to the hated Tennessee Vols. Jonathan Leifheit, the publisher of GoJackets.com, is here with us as always, and Jonathan was there at the stadium, and I guess we could say he is ready to file a report.
I'm ready to file something. I'm not sure if it's a report or maybe just a missing persons a report. Maybe that'll work.
Well, this was a game where Georgia Tech honestly was the better team. I think Georgia Tech impressed me. I mean, with Marshall's play at quarterback, he was a guy that came in there after questions. We were talking last week who the starter was going to be. I mean, he looked like he'd been starting in Paul Johnson's offense for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, he played exceptionally well, and I thought the offense as a whole played exceptionally well. They had 2 mistakes that completely cost them. The second one particularly, and really I could probably point to a third mistake that was a key penalty on a drive. But by and large, when you put up 650 yards of offense, you shouldn't lose a game.
It shouldn't even be that close.
No, it should not. And you know, it's funny. I started thinking back on Marta, and I was thinking to myself, have I ever seen such a statistical domination where the team that didn't do it win? And unfortunately, I came up with the answer, yes.
Don't tell me Georgia Tech.
Yes, Georgia Tech. 1998, Georgia Tech played a rather thrilling game against UVA, where Georgia Tech put up a meager 370 yards of offense and gave up 600 yards to the Cavaliers. And somehow or another, they managed to find a way. Well, in that game, there was the hidden yardage. 200-plus yards of return yardage, plus a fumble return. None of that shows up in that 600 yards or that 370. And the same thing was true against Tennessee. All night long, Tennessee was operating with really good field position, and all night long, Georgia Tech was pinned deep. Tennessee's punter wow, fantastic punter. He did a great job all night long, and their coverage was great. Our kickoffs were horrendous. Every single time the kickoffs they weren't deep. They'd pick it up. They'd have plenty of room to run. They didn't get good coverage on the kickoff team. So Tennessee's starting they're every time they're starting at midfield. So when you only have 50 yards to go as opposed to 80, guess what? You're not going to get as many yards. And so Tech dominated that game statistically, but you got to do the little things to make it work. And that's what Paul Johnson, talked about rather angrily in the post game is just how bad it was from the kicking game. The kicking game was so bad that it literally cost them this game.
Now tell us about the kicker, because he was not the main kicker for Tech, right?
That is correct. Sean Davis is a walk-on sophomore. I believe he's out of Henry County, Stockbridge, and he was not expected to be the kicker. Brent King was signed to scholarship last year, was going to be the guy to replace Harrison Butker, who was, holy cow, do we ever appreciate him now.
No kidding. He's the guy we can directly attribute a victory, I know, against Virginia Tech.
Oh, we can
and more.
And more. I mean, you go back to that 2014 game against Georgia where he kicks the 53-yarder to tie the game with nothing on the clock. I mean, ridiculous amount of things that he did. And his kickoffs, he was hitting 70-80% into the end zone. I mean, Georgia Tech had no coverage problems because they didn't have to cover. This year, now we do. Now you got a kicker who's inexperienced. He's not a scholarship kicker. Brent King, who was the heir apparent, spent the entire preseason with a pulled groin muscle. And if there's one thing that you can't have with your kicker, it's a pulled groin muscle. So he hasn't been available. From what I understand, he's started doing extra points, and we should be able to see him kind of make a return. But the latest out of practice was that even today, as late as today, that Coach Johnson was not happy with the kickers.
No, but you think King will be back at full capacity soon?
Yes, soon. Is it this weekend? I'm not so sure, but he'll be back in full capacity. And the question is what is full capacity for a true freshman kicker? And you got to go back look at Butker's
he's
progression.
A true freshman this year.
Yeah, he signed.
So he's kicking high school football.
Exactly. He signed in February and reported with all the rest of the freshmen over the summer. So, but he's still a true freshman, and there's going to be some growing pains with that. He's got a good leg. There's a reason we signed him to scholarship, but freshman year.
Well, let's talk about the block kick there at the end of the regulation. Was that the kicker's fault?
Oh, definitely.
I mean, it was a low kick?
Oh, they didn't block it. He kicked it into him.
Okay.
I mean, the guy had his arms up. He had a little penetration, but it wasn't enough to warrant a block. And all the guy did was he took him too long. He set up. He hit it. He basically hit the ball too high. And so instead of getting it under it to get it up, he hit it and hit a line drive. And basically hits the guy right in the hand. And he's not more than a half a yard in penetration on the front.
If the players weren't even there, that ball would not have gotten to the crossbar.
I think it would have gotten to the crossbar. Would it have made it? I don't know. The trajectory was tough to tell as to whether or not it would have been left or right.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, this young man, I know, is feeling it more than anybody. And
yeah, I mean, let's not go after him. He was put in a tough situation, and he gave it his best, and that's all you can ask. I mean, could I go out there and do it? No.
And let's face it, Georgia Tech could have scored a touchdown. Maybe
should have scored a touchdown on the first. Well, let's look at. He had 2 missed field goals. On the first missed field goal, the reason they were put in a field goal position was a illegal block by center Kenny Cooper. Moved him back 15 yards from the point of the foul. Was that a really illegal block? Did you see it? I did not see it, so I couldn't comment on it. I'm going to assume it was. I didn't hear anybody questioning that. And then look at the second one, the game winner on his time expired. 2 or 3 plays before that, what happened? Quay Searcy is wide open, and when I say wide open, there's nobody within 20 yards of him. And Marshall had a tiny bit of pressure in his face, and he overthrows Searcy. So both of those coulda, shoulda, woulda been touchdowns.
Well, we'll talk more about it as we go back through this tough loss in Week 1 for Georgia Tech at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This is BuzzLine from Buffalo's Cafe coming. We'll be right back. Good stuff. All right, Facebook Live, we're getting ready to start segment 2 as we continue to go through the loss to Tennessee. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, don't forget, if you have a question or comment for Jonathan, let us know. We're going to have our Buffalo's Cafe Wingman of the Week. So you want to make sure you ask us a good question. All right? And welcome back to BuzzLine from Buffalo's Cafe, Cumming, Georgia, where kids eat free Sunday and Tuesdays here at Buffalo's Cafe. There's 27 TV sets here. You can't miss a spot. If you want to come in and watch one of your favorite games, tennis has been on this week with the U.S. Open, maybe a little golf, of course, Georgia Tech sports. This is the place to come in Cumming, Georgia, and beyond. Buffalo's Cafe with Jonathan Leifheit, publisher of GoJackets.com. We're talking Georgia Tech sports. I was able to acquire a Georgia Tech authentic football helmet since our last show, Jonathan. Hopefully you will approve.
I definitely approve of that. That looks fantastic. I might even have to wear that for a later segment.
Yes, we will wear it. We need to do that. I think it would improve our ratings. But it's a nice addition to our set here. Of course, we've got our Georgia Tech scooter, if you haven't seen our show before, in the background. And we're all tech here at Buffalo's Cafe Cumming. Georgia Tech falls in week 1 to Tennessee, the hated Vols, the team that the Jackets played for so many years back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They got together again at this brand new palace in downtown Atlanta. And unfortunately, Georgia Tech ran out of gas. Is that a good way to say it?
I would say that they kind of choked it, to be honest.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
They kind of choked that one away a little bit.
But the Tech's defense, at least they're not Texas A&M.
No, that's a fact. And we didn't lose to Liberty.
Or Howard.
I was about to bring them in. The largest upset in college football history, I think, according to the bookies.
That's right.
So.
And we're not the Falcons.
Let's just not go down that path.
Either way, it's not a fun thing. But, hey, if you're going to lose, at least since this was the first week of the year, I really wasn't sure how well this team would show up and how good they would look. And I would have to say that the vast majority of this game, Georgia Tech was very impressive.
Oh, I agree with that, particularly the first half. The defense played reasonably well the first half. I mean, but I'm a little worried that it wasn't so much the defense playing well as it was UT kind of emptying their guns into their feet. They dropped a lot. They overthrew a lot. And I thought their play calling was a little bizarre given they have a great running back in Kelly. And they kind of ignored him. In the second half, they finally got to kind of doing some of that stuff and, giving it to Kelly. He ran well. On top of that, they stopped dropping balls and they stopped overthrowing them and they got into a rhythm. So I think and that's when the defense kind of fell. But the offense completely dominating and special teams was completely ugly.
TaQuon Marshall, we haven't really bragged on him enough.
No, we haven't even mentioned him yet, and we mentioned we knew he'd probably be the starter going into the game, and he responded in a big way. I believe it was 249 yards of rushing, which pretty much set I believe an ACC and Georgia Tech record for quarterback rushing. And you think about all the quarterbacks that we've had at Georgia Tech in this rushing offense. TaQuon comes out and in his first game sets the record for quarterback rushing. He played fantastic, and it was interesting. I was curious as to what kind of offense we would see under Johnson with a new quarterback.
Yeah.
Every time we've had a kind of a quarterback change, we had Nesbitt to start with. He was a big burly guy, probably not the greatest passer, but he was a really big guy. Then you moved to Tevin Washington, was a little smaller, not quite as quick, a little better passer than Nesbitt. Then you moved to Vadley, which was a completely, complete shift. We had all these diamonds. We had shotgun. We had all kinds of crazy stuff. And when he left, then we went to Justin, got away from some of the midline and some of the more power stuff. And now we saw some of that come back again. So really interested to see how the offense evolves under TaQuon. I think we'll see things that we haven't seen either yet or in a long while in the offense. And there was a heck of a lot of things that weren't the option out there. There's a lot of straight gives, a lot of power blocking, things that, I think that Johnson has had in his sleeve. We saw some of that 2014, but hadn't seen it since, just glimpses of that. And then also some formations. They run what's called a heavy where you put basically 2 tackles or 2 guards, however you want to look at it, out on one side of the ball or the other, and 1 wide receiver, and then just tell them we're going to run it and try and stop us. And well, guess what? UT didn't. So
yeah. For his outstanding performance on the ground, Marshall was named the ACC Back of the Week this week, so I don't think that was too hard for the committee to come up with that one.
No, I don't think so. Given what he did out there in his debut performance, I mean, he fantastic. You can't say enough.
Yeah. Let's talk about the other backs, the A-backs, B-backs. What did you think of all their performances?
Well, we had, I think the other one to note was Kervonte Benson, and we all know, we talked about last week's show, Dedrick Mills dismissed, gone off the team, now playing in community college in Kansas. And Benson was kind of an unknown. He redshirted last year, and he comes out there and actually kind of looked a lot like Dave Meggett to me. As somebody made that comment on the Hive, and I thought that was pretty appropriate. Kind of a smaller guy, but he rushed for, I think it was about 125 yards plus or minus. Did a great job, in my opinion, and he was running hard between the tackles. So good job by him out there. The A-backs and the B-backs, the A-backs, we kind of knew what we had. J.J. Green, Quay Searcy, Clinton Lynch was still out with an injury. The newcomer to that bunch was Nathan Cottrell, and I thought he acquitted himself very nicely. Ran for about, I think it was 78 yards, either 70 or 78 yards on the night. So he had a pretty good debut as well as far as playing and the offense is concerned. He did do some kick returns last year.
Hey, we don't want to leave this guy out either, Jonathan. I was impressed with the couple times he got the ball. Quade Weimerskirch. Did I say it right?
You did say it right. That is the case. So Benson did go out. I believe it was in the third quarter, late in the third quarter with cramps, which, given the number of plays we ran, that was no surprise. And he came in there and did a nice job backing up. I wasn't sure if we would see Quade or if we would see Jerry Howard. It turned out to be Quade. He's also, I believe, a redshirt as well. I believe he's a sophomore, redshirt freshman, I guess. He was out there playing as well. He did a good job, but I think Benson, you could see why Benson was the starter over Weimerskirch. He was just a little quicker and a little better. But
the entire backfield, as we talked about last week, a complete question mark going into this first game of the season.
Yeah, quarterback and B-back. We didn't know what we had. Well,
it looks like we're okay.
Yeah, it looks like, barring injury, knock, 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 we're going to be good.
And I don't recall any fumbles.
Actually, there were
the one almost at the end of the game.
There were 3 fumbles on the day. TaQuon Marshall had one right around midfield. He got hit by a linebacker. UT hit him and caused it. There was a second.
Was that a change of possession?
It was.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking mentally of the late game where Georgia Tech could have sealed it.
Yes. The second fumble was on a pitch to Quay Searcy. Marshall actually pitched it behind him. Fortunately, Searcy was able to jump on it. And then the last one you mentioned, that probably game-clinching drive that would have, should have, could have done that for the Jackets. J.J. Green fumbles on about the 20, got it punched out from behind. So those 3 fumbles were all pretty crucial, and those 2 turnovers, particularly Green's, and I know he feels sick about it, were probably the 2 worst. Was probably the one that hurt the Jackets the most.
The final fumble, of course, was the big one because Georgia Tech had a two touchdown lead. That one could have put it on ice, could it not?
No, that one, at that point, it was about 4.5 minutes to go. They were up by 7. It was 28-21.
Okay.
If they go in, they go up by 14, and there's only 5 minutes left to go in the game. I don't think UT has – they probably could have scored, but then they would have had to get the ball back, and their only option there would have been to onside kick it. So I don't see how they could have possibly stopped the Jackets the way that offense was rolling. They had to been able to run out the clock.
Just a very tough – I mean, we don't want to pick on any of these guys that coughed the ball up, but, man, that one there toward the end. I mean, Georgia Tech had the game well in their grasp.
Yeah, they were basically cruising in for another score, and that was going to put the game out of reach, and lo and behold, suddenly UT's got it with a chance to tie the game, and by God, they sure did.
Yeah, a tough one there. Jonathan, other thoughts before we hear from Coach Paul Johnson in a moment?
Well, I talked a little bit about the defense, and also I wanted to note the other question was going to be who was going to back up the starting quarterback. It turned out to be Matthew Jordan. We thought maybe Johnson would get the nod, but Marshall went out with a stinger in his arm. He plays 2 plays, gets 3 yards on the first, throws a pass, I thought it was a bad pass on the second one. He should have thrown it to the outside, and he threw it to the inside, allowed the UT guy to get inside leverage, and so he was able to knock the receiver off the ball without a penalty. So all in all, it's pretty good. I mean, all in all, it wasn't pretty good, but it was didn't answer any questions about what he could and couldn't do.
Yep. Well, after the game, the staff of GoJackets.com was able to catch up with Georgia Tech head football coach Paul Johnson, and we have a little portion of that audio that we're going to share with everybody now and get the coach's thoughts on what he saw out there. Of course, never fun to talk to Paul Johnson after a loss, but that's what they had to deal with. And we're going to talk about his decision to go for 2 there in the second overtime in just a second. But let's first hear from the head man of Georgia Tech football, Paul Johnson, right here on BuzzLine from CRM Sports.
Well, I was certainly disappointed with the outcome. I think there were some positives that we can build on in the game. Our young guys on offense, I thought, went out and played pretty well. The quarterback, to be back, it's the last fumble kills. I think we've got the game in control down there, in spite of being horrendous on special teams kicking the ball. I think we could have scored there, run the clock down, and I'm not sure they would have had enough time to score twice. But, we didn't. They did. You give them credit. Guy knocked the ball out. And at the end there, I just felt like that we had a better chance of getting a 2-point conversion than we did of stopping them. They had scored twice in 3 plays in the 2 overtimes. So in the second half, once they got rolling, there wasn't much stopping them. So.
Paul, did you feel that maybe the defense wore down a little bit?
From what? Let's see. Yeah, they wore down.
I mean, they tackled well in the beginning of the game.
We had the ball 41 minutes. They had it 18.
Right.
If they wore down in this game, they better get their best hold.
All right, raise your hand. We're going to get you a wireless microphone. Please wait for the microphone. We'll go right here in the second row next.
Hey, Coach, at what point, either during camp or the week, did you know TaQuon was going to be your starter? And what can you say just about the job that he did tonight?
He played his tail off. I thought he played tremendously, and I've known he was going to be the starter for about 2.5 or 3 weeks. He gives us a guy. He can actually throw the ball well, too. We didn't throw it a lot. But I thought he played well. I thought Cravante ran hard. I thought he played well, too.
Georgia Tech head football coach Paul Johnson there in a tough setting after the loss to Tennessee. We're with Jonathan Leifheit at GoJackets.com. I'm Jon Rawl, and Jonathan, your cohort at GoJackets.com is the one we just heard ask the question about the defense melting away there in this loss to Tennessee, and that was a good question.
Well, yeah, it was a good – I think his point was more of why did the defense fade in the second half than it was anything else. And I don't know that – I certainly agree with Johnson. If you're fading with 18 minutes of possession, which is what Tennessee had through the course of the 60 minute of regulation, you got a problem. But that's what happened. And I still think, though, that the Tennessee – or the Georgia Tech defense didn't play so well in the first half as much as Tennessee just shot themselves in the foot. So I think it finally caught up with them. Tennessee was then able to start moving the ball. And as I mentioned, they started running Kelly, and they'd gotten away from that in the first half. I felt like that was a mistake, and I mentioned it to my buddy that I was sitting with at the game. I wasn't sure why they weren't running the ball, and next thing you know, they start doing that, and it starts to have an impact.
Well, if you were like me watching the game Labor Day night, it was nice to feel the lead that Tech enjoyed there late in the game and really throughout the game. But you just knew things were going so well offensively that when you had like 8 minutes left in the game and Tech had the ball, you thought there was a good chance that Tennessee would never touch the ball again.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest, I think the funny part is they actually went down the field so fast that J.J. Green's fumble happened with about 5 minutes to go in the game. So you figure that had they held on to the ball, Tennessee would have gotten it, but it would have probably been with about 3 minutes to go. With a 14-point lead and 3 minutes to go, and that offense, the only way Tennessee was going to do anything was to score quickly,
And in desperation for them, that one pass was literally he just threw it up.
And then they would have had to onside kick it, and they'd have had the hands team in there. So it really that fumble really killed them there at the end. I mean, they had other opportunities. There was numerous opportunities they had to put that game away, and they failed to do it. And that's just goes to show you play a good team with some good talent, and you give them a crack, and they're going to kick it open.
Well, after this show's over, we're all going to have to go to a little therapy before we get ready for another game on the schedule. We'll take a break here at Buffalo's Cafe in Cumming, Georgia. Jonathan Leifheit, Jon Rawl, thanking you for once again being a part of BuzzLine. When we come back, we'll hear from the quarterback for the Jackets in a very impressive start in Week 1, Mr. Marshall. We'll be right back with the show. I don't want you to actually touch any of that stuff. It's so fragile tonight. I'd rather you not mess with anything.
All right, we'll just have to let it go then.
You didn't see any other ones available?
Amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, it was it was exciting to get out there, especially to be in the new dome. Was on the backside. Reversed out, tried to get outside of it. They dove in on the pylon, but like I said, like in preparation that you can have this kind of dominant performance. Leading up to this game, be ready to play Saturday. Leading up.
All right, Facebook Live, we're getting ready to start back with our next segment. We're going to hear from the quarterback for the Jackets, TaQuon Marshall. And, again, we got at least one good question that's come in that we'll answer as we continue on with our show from Buffalo's Cafe on a Tuesday. Now, normally we do this show on Sundays, but because of the Monday night game, we had to push it back to this week. So if you wanted to come join us, we want you to, but we will normally be here on Sundays at 5:30 Eastern Time, assuming this Sunday we can do it because of maybe some bad weather coming in from this hurricane. And we wish everybody the best if you're going to be dealing with Hurricane Irma. Hopefully it'll be a long way off of any coast, but unfortunately, that's part of living in the South in September and October is dealing with hurricanes. All right, Mr. Leifheit, are you ready?
Ready.
And welcome back to BuzzLine, a production of CRM Sports. We are here at Buffalo's Cafe in Cumming, Georgia. And at this Buffalo's Cafe, Jonathan, you may or may not be interested in this. They have a great beer selection here, including 14 drafts, and they even have local craft beers.
Well, that sounds great. I'm not a beer drinker, but I know plenty of people who are.
All right. Well, maybe you'll like this. They have a great, friendly wait staff.
Well, that's
here.
Always a plus.
And they're taking care of us here. We've got Bailey working with us this show, and just a nice, friendly face here, and they're Georgia Tech friendly at Buffalo's Cafe in Cumming, Georgia. All right, we're looking back at the loss to the Tennessee Vols. Jonathan, one thing you told me before we got going this week was an encounter you had post-game. If you can clean it up, what can you share for our family audience?
Oh, it was no real big deal. Rod and I got on Marta and a couple of UT fans. I probably had been drinking a bit, decided that they were going to talk about what chokers and losers we were. And all I could think of was, you're not worth going to prison over, and I walked away. So, but I know I got plenty of friends who went to UT, good folks. I don't view them at that as a representation of their fan base at large. I'm sure we had a few yahoos doing their own thing for Georgia Tech as well.
Well, Georgia Tech not only held their own and should have won this game, frankly, against Tennessee this week, but even in the history of this series, Georgia Tech has held its own. I think
yep.
Was it last time they played, did Tech win that one? Or
No, the last game was in '87, and UT won that 29-15. The year before that, Georgia Tech won 14-13. I think the overall series is now at 25-17, and probably a couple of sorted ties, and UT leads it overall now.
Okay. Always fun to see the old teams come back on the schedule, even though this wasn't a true home game for Tech. It was good to see that history, as Georgia Tech is a school with a proud history, and this would have been a little bit better had they won. Well, let's go in now and hear from the quarterback for the Jackets, TaQuon Marshall. Again, a banner day for him, a history-making week at the quarterback position, and he was able to catch up with Rod McKenzie of GoJackets.com after the loss to the Vols. And let's hear from the quarterback now for just a moment on BuzzLine.
Yeah, it was exciting to get out there, especially to be in the new dome. I thought we played pretty well, but we're going to have to put this one behind us and pick it up next week, come out with the win next week.
Going, how fast do you feel like you can bounce back from this, disappointing to have the kind of yardage happen and still lose it?
I think I'll be able to bounce back pretty quick. Just hydrate good, eat right, go to treatment, and I think I'll be fine by Saturday.
TaQuon, Coach said he knew you were going to be Jackets 3 weeks ago. When did he tell you that you were start?
He told me during camp. It was like the last week of camp, so I moved in, started getting familiar with the guys.
TaQuon, I'm curious, you played really well. You guys are up 2 touchdowns twice, but you lose in a tough way. What are your emotions right now? What are you feeling?
I really wish the results would have been different. I can't change that. Got to put it behind me and come back next week this week ready to work. And I'm gonna bring the guys on board with me and lead them. And we're gonna be ready to play Saturday.
And that was Georgia Tech quarterback TaQuon Marshall post-game after the loss to Tennessee, as Georgia Tech loses in double overtime. Jonathan, I want to get your opinion on the coaching decision there. I honestly thought, with the way that the defense had been playing there late in the ball game, that there was a good chance Tennessee would go for 2 when they had the ball, and they scored their touchdown in overtime. But they just decided to kick the extra point.
Well, I think they felt like, one, they've got a reliable kicker. 2, if they do need to go to the next overtime, they're going to have to go for 2 at that point. So they kind of had an advantage in that respect. And I think Coach Johnson knew that if they got to another overtime, that when he goes for 2, he had a good shot at making it based on the way the offense had been going. But he just was ready to try and send the deciding factor right now instead of trying to get into a war of 2 points with UT. So I completely support the decision. I thought when he did it, I thought it was the right thing to do. I still believe it was the right thing to do.
And honestly, Georgia Tech should be able to get 3 yards on every play.
Well, and to Johnson's point, if you listen to some of the later audio, I think that we didn't. The play was there, and if Marshall pitches that ball out to Benson, it's a foot race to the pylon. If one of the 2 linemen doesn't whiff on their blocks, Marshall's probably able to just walk right in. So it was the right play call. They had all the numbers to the right side. They actually, I think, had them outnumbered by 2, and they managed to miss the block and also miss the pitch. Game over.
Do you think the play was changed after Tennessee called their last timeout? Remember, Tech went out there and then Tennessee called a timeout. Do you think?
No, probably not. I think that they knew that play had been working and getting to the edge. Johnson's pretty decisive. He doesn't waffle around on that stuff too much. So I think once they made the call, and then when they lined up and they knew they had numbers, there was no reason to change it. So I mean, they lined up the first time and the second time, I think, pretty much the same way.
Well, again, it's just so frustrating, and you come out, you do such a good job, and then you have to walk away with a loss. That's what really is so hard about this game.
Well, as the saying goes, you got to be sound in the kicking game. We weren't.
But, friends, the season is not made by one game.
No, it's not. And if we want to go back in time, I will never forget that same 1998 season that we just discussed with the UVA game. Georgia Tech came out and laid an absolute egg to what turned out to be a 4-7 Boston College team. They went on to go 10-2, finished AP top 10. So one game ain't going to do it. but you got to show up because next week's game, short week against a good team, even though they're FCS, it's going to be a challenge.
Yep. I thought you were talking about the 1990 season and the tie at Virginia is what I thought you were referencing.
No, the tie was at North Carolina.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, and we beat Virginia 41-38 that year as well. So, but, yeah, that's another good example, though. They went out and tied, but they kept on fighting and got through undefeated. So, one game doesn't make a difference. It has an impact, but it doesn't define your season.
And this didn't go down as a conference loss.
Nope.
It was the first game of the season. People will probably have forgotten about it if Georgia Tech gets into the championship contention at the end of the season.
Yep.
It was against a Power 5 program, SEC program. So.
And it'll probably be down to them, Florida and Georgia, as to who wins the SEC East. Now the SEC East is no powerhouse division, but nonetheless, they'll be in the mix.
All right. We'll come back. We'll turn our attention to the folks from Jacksonville, Alabama, as the Gamecocks cross over into Georgia this weekend. We'll preview that matchup and look around the ACC. This is BuzzLine from Buffalo's Cafe incoming. All right, here we are. Back on. Are we posted now on your?
I think so. I lost battery.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. We all are having a hangover.
Yes, even my computer is apparently on hangover today.
Yeah.
Which is, it's actually kind of disappointing because I think 2 hours of battery, that ain't good anymore.
Yeah. BuzzLine, broadcasting from Buffalo's Cafe, coming. I'm Jon Rawl with Jonathan Leifheit, the czar of GoJackets.com. He and Rod McKenzie have all the juicy information on Georgia Tech sports. Please go check it out. They're part of the 24/7 sports digital footprint. CBS Interactive. Do I have all the nomenclature right?
And we're still Scout at this point.
And still Scout.
At this point.
But the synopsis is, if you want to know about what's going on in Georgia Tech sports world, you got to go to GoJackets.com, okay? It's that simple. Lots of analysis, lots of opinions about what happened as Georgia Tech fell to Tennessee in the opening week. I know it was a loss, but thank goodness college football is back. The stars are just so much more aligned when college football is in play, even though this was not the best of weeks for Georgia Tech. Week 2, Jacksonville State from the Ohio Valley Conference, FCS. They come into Atlanta for the home opener, the true home opener for Georgia Tech. And Jacksonville State's coming in after taking last weekend off, but they actually got a jump start on college football, playing Chattanooga in Montgomery in the opening week of all football, like August 25th or something like that.
Yep.
So Jack State, the Gamecocks, they're a scary team. They played for the FCS National Championship 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, they've got talent over there, and you know, Georgia Tech's played them twice in the past. Actually, Paul Johnson's, I believe, his opening game of all time was against Jack State back in 2008. So, played them before, and this is not a team to be trifled with. Now you're looking at a team that's had an off week. They've got a game under their belt. Georgia Tech's on a short week, and they're probably a little pissed off about Tennessee. So, they got to get past that Tennessee game. They got to get themselves healed up, rested up, and prepared for this game, all on a short week. So if they come out with a win, I don't care how close it is, I'm going to be happy because this is going to be a lot tougher. I think a lot tougher than people think. And if they go out there and blow them away, I'll be pretty surprised, but happily surprised.
When you talk about early Paul Johnson years and FCS opponents, I'm still biting my nails over that Gardner-Webb game.
Well, I mean, that was probably the biggest anomaly ever because when you try and play Kelvin Booker as an option quarterback who was a prototypical drop-back passer,
yeah,
you're just setting yourself up. If you might remember, both Josh Nesbitt and Jabo Shaw were out that game. We were at their third-string quarterback, and Dante is a lot of things, but an option quarterback he will never be confused for.
Okay. Well, Jacksonville State, as we said, they've been very good here of late, and the big underlying theme here is Georgia Tech not only is coming off a short week, but a very emotional game, lengthy game. Are they going to be ready?
Well, that's what we're hoping for. So, I mean, we'll see come 12:30 on Saturday. That'll be the
toe meets leather.
Toe meets leather, 12:30 on Saturday.
All right, Jacksonville State, as far as you know, do they run a traditional spread-type option, spread offense?
I think they run kind of a spread offense. I think they kind of do a little up-tempo stuff. I don't think there's nothing too, tropical or whatever you want to call it about them. So
nothing you're too concerned about, but Georgia Tech maybe doesn't need to shoot themselves in the foot in this one.
Yeah, I'm more worried in this game about Georgia Tech than I am about Jacksonville State, and that's not meant as a disrespect to Jack State. But Georgia Tech, all things being equal, a lot more talent, a lot more depth, and they should win this. But guess what? Things aren't equal. Jack State has a week off. Georgia Tech has a short week. So that could be an equalizer.
And the Gamecocks wasn't that long ago. They beat Ole Miss in a season opener for the Rebels, and they took Auburn to overtime.
That's right.
I think 2 years ago. So
yep,
they would love to be the giant killer, and they're capable of doing it. And Jacksonville State is no easy game on the schedule. So be out there, wear your white and gold. I guess specifically, are they asking for a particular color this week?
Well, it's always wear your gold. I mean, we'll have an annual white outfit.
What shade of gold?
Yeah, there you go. This shade of gold right there.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Just show up and support Georgia Tech. Before we go to break, your thoughts on the other ACC games that happened this past weekend. It was not the greatest of weekends for the conference.
No, it was not. And NC State had a game a lot like ours. They beat South Carolina up and down the field and then found a way to lose it. I don't know what happened to Florida State in that second half, but they absolutely self-destructed. And their quarterback goes out for the season. I think it was a torn tendon of some sort.
Yeah.
So not good there. Cal comes in and beats North Carolina.
That was a surprise.
That was a surprise for them. And so, all in all, if you're the ACC after crowing about last year, and rightfully so.
And having commercials run every commercial break, it seemed, promoting how great the ACC was.
Exactly. They didn't back it up.
I
this
thought
weekend.
Georgia Tech was going to be the shining star of the conference.
If they had won, they would have been easily.
And they should have won, as we
could have, should have, would have
in length. But unfortunately, this one didn't turn out too good for Georgia Tech. And then most of the teams played very unglamorous opponents. North Carolina Central and Duke, I believe, was the contest there.
I think that might have been the shining star there.
Duke.
Either that or Pitt over Youngstown State.
That was an overtime game, I think.
No, it was 28-21. They were up 28 to 7 at one point, I believe.
No, it went to overtime.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
It was 21-0 at one point.
Youngstown State came back. I watched it. It went to overtime, and Youngstown State, I think, similar to Georgia Tech, I believe they missed a kick to win the game, I think.
Wow. I'm
getting my games confused. That's one of the good things about college football. It's so exciting, but there's so many games now with so many divisions of football that thanks to ESPN3, you can watch all these crazy contests. So, yeah, that one definitely was a comeback for Youngstown State, and they should have beat Pitt. Absolutely, they should have beat them, but they didn't.
Wow.
All right, we'll take a break from Buffalo's Cafe. We'll come right back with our last segment of this week's BuzzLine. Stick around. All right, last segment. All right, we're back with our final segment on this week's BuzzLine, talking Georgia Tech football and more with Jonathan Leifheit of GoJackets.com, Jon Rawl, and we want to give away our Wingman of the Week here at Buffalo's Cafe. They're very proud of their wings and the other offerings that are available. And, Jonathan, I think this guy deserves our Wingman of the Week with all of his input on the show, and that's Keith Minter.
Absolutely. Let's give Keith some wings.
All right, Keith, you had a couple of questions that you asked us, and Can you decipher what he's saying here? Because
yeah, and I apologize. I've lost my my battery.
Some
so I
of
have to
this is
over.
in code, and I don't understand what exactly he's asking.
Oh, okay. Let's skip the Gardner Webb. I think we've answered that one. 2.5 to 3 weeks. Did he order a code red on MJ in the first scrimmage? I believe that was in reference to Johnson's comment that he's known for 2.5 to 3 weeks that Marshall was going to be the starter.
Okay.
So, and I think largely that was due. Jordan actually sat out most of spring, and then he actually re-injured himself early in the fall practice, and TaQuon Marshall took complete advantage of that and made himself the starter. So that was one piece that he did. And I think I saw another question from Keith around did the missed interference penalty impact Georgia Tech? And actually, the one he's referring to was when Jordan went deep on one of his couple of plays to Searcy. I actually don't think that was an interference. There was some contact there, but when you throw the ball to the middle of the field instead of the outside, you got to remember that the defender has a right to the ball as well. So I think they viewed that as kind of incidental going for the ball contact, although could have gone the other way. Jordan should have thrown that to the outside. He does that. Probably they get a call if the guy bumps him off.
Well, I wanted to ask one thing we didn't cover was with Marshall at quarterback. There were a couple times where he did have to leave, and looked like he got dinged up slightly.
He left for, I think it was 2 plays.
Okay.
In that case, they just got a stinger on his arm, but it did not. He actually wanted to go out back out after 1 play. Trainers held him out for a second play. And then, of course, Georgia Tech had to punt due to the not getting first down on 3rd down. So he got to sit out a little while. But it clearly didn't have an impact on him.
All right. One thing we try to do on this second week of the BuzzLine, because it is the opening week this weekend of the NFL. Jonathan, anything you want to say about Jackets in the NFL?
One thing I'll note is a former NFLer, Calvin Johnson, was our captain Monday night. That was nice. Other than that, Justin,
any rookies from Georgia Tech?
Not that I've noticed or not that I've seen. Justin Thomas, I think, ended up getting cut. I'll have to go back and check that, but he was kind of moving around in practice squads. If nothing else, he might have made a practice squad, but I don't even think that happened either.
All right, what about Butker?
Butker's, yes, of course. He's with Charlotte, up there playing for those guys.
The Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, whatever.
My favorite team, by the way.
I keep wanting to call him Charlotte.
But he's actually their kicker?
Oh, he is their kicker.
Because they've had a long-time kicker. I didn't realize they.
Yeah, they have drafted him, or not drafted him, but they signed him. So
okay.
I think he made that. I'll have to go back and check it, but I thought so.
That's a good thing. For a long time, they had another Georgia connection at their kicker, John Casey, who played for that team in Clark County. Collegiately, but maybe a Jacket will get in there and do good things for the Panthers. Of course, most of you want to see him choke whenever he faces off against the Falcons.
Well, I don't really care. I'm not a big Falcons fan either. So. I like him all right. I'm just kind of indifferent to the NFL.
So opening week for NFL this week, and, of course, the Jackets and Jacksonville State going to be what'd you say, high noon kickoff?
12:30.
12:30, and it's going to be fun to be back on the flats with this opening game of 2017 at home, and hopefully they'll be able to put this Tennessee game behind them and put a win in the column and move along in the schedule.
Yep, that's big because the next few games after that, they just get a little tougher and tougher.
Got UCF in Orlando and then Pitt at home on September 23rd.
Yep.
Well, Jonathan, thank you very much. I know it's been a very tough week for you with the schedule and the loss and all that, but you have been a hero once again.
I'm a tired hero if I'm that.
Yeah, but we will all be back here hopefully with shining, smiling faces when we record BuzzLine once again next week. Until that time, Jon Rawl thanking our great audience here at Buffalo's Cafe in Cumming.
And go Jackets!
As he said.